Well, hello, friends and neighbors. John, your whiskey neighbor here, and welcome out to the deck. Finally, a beautiful winter day here near Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. We've been in deep freeze for way too long, and then this week we really thawed out. So it's, I don't know, minus a couple maybe in the sun. We're in the pluses. It's gorgeous. Want to keep the value series going because it's January. Now, this I didn't buy in January, but this is a Canadian whiskey I picked up when I was in Ontario this summer, and it is called Barnburner. It says it's from Maverick Distillery. So, I'll tell you a little bit about this Canadian. It's an Ontario whiskey when you get back. Is it a good value? Well, we'll let the whiskey talk, and I'll share what little bit I do know about this bottle. Barnburner from Maverick. 3, 4. Thanks for staying with me or coming back. The Canadian Whiskey Awards were just released. Davin Kurgum always does a fantastic job. Clearly the person who knows the most of about Canadian whiskey, I suggest in this country, literally wrote the book. And I was interested, I like watching it. I like looking at the winners, and I didn't notice Barnburner on there, and I was surprised. Because, when I picked this up, it's got some interesting cred. It says it's locally sourced corn and rye from Ontario. It's 83 proof, so, it's just a little bit more, 40, what is that in percent? 41 and a half, something like that, 41.6. It does say non-chill filtered, so it's got a few check boxes. Non-chill filtered, a little higher proof. Small batch, says it's local Ontario. Double aged in bourbon barrels, and that's interesting. And I saw a media post from 3 years ago about this from, I think it's Chris Peters, the fellow who's distilling. And even though it says source, and so I thought, well, they've run out and bought a couple of barrels from some big person. It read, the media post on Reddit read like they've been laying down their own corn and a bit of rye. And the rye was in new oak and the old corn was in ex-bourbon or some new oak. And then they blended it, and then they put it back in for a few weeks, it seemed, not even months, I thought, but in some fresh dumped, and he's mentioned Beam Distillery ex-bourbon. So it really looked like not sourced, like they'd been putting out their own stuff. But regardless, it's about a 3 to 4 year old whiskey, definitely mostly corn, a little bit of rye, and they kind of marry it in a fresh dumped Jim Beam barrel. So for me, it's got quite a bit of cred. So let's see what the whiskey talks. First of all, no doubt it's colored. So I'm ignoring the color. Let's just look at the nose and the taste and share if this whiskey's any good. Out here in the snow, I always get a little bit of metallic, but I blame the situation. The nose for me is sweet, butterscotch sweet, toffee sweet, caramel sweet. It's got a very sweet and thick toffee kind of nose to it. I would like a little more spice or a little more oak, not getting that, but definitely getting that sweet note, and doesn't put me off. Let's try it on the palate. Hope you got some Canadian to pour along. Cheers. The palate doesn't stay far from the nose. A lot of caramel sweetness, butter sweetness, corn sweetness, all of those things going on. Clearly sweet, but buttery caramel, a lot of caramel. I remember pouring this to a friend I found online, and he too, one of his first comments was, wow, what an explosion of caramel. It's like, I'm even thinking those unwrapped, remember those little squares we used to unwrap and have to melt if we wanted to do anything with caramel? I remember that as a kid, and this reminds me of that. A little bit gritty, full caramel flavoring. Another sip. Next sip does answer with a little bit of rye spice. There's not a lot of rye in here. I mean, maybe there is. I just mean my palate doesn't pick up a ton of rye spice, but it's certainly there. If I have a couple of sips as I did, or if I sip through a dram, I definitely start to pick up a little more oaking, a little char on the finish. and that spicing does come up in the palate. And for me, it's really just a peppering or a heat, but not an alcohol heat. I mean, that's there. It's, you know, pretty young, but there is, I suggest, a rye character. Nothing pushing into, you know, grainy, grassy, or herbal, or menthol, or anything like that kind of rye. I just mean it's bringing a bit of spice to a very sweet, corn-forward whiskey. I'm disappointed that we can't get this in Alberta because it's not a bad dram. Is it one that, even though I just said that, would I chase after and get right after? No, you know, it's a classic 3.5 on my scale, but it is a solid 3.5 by the same token. I paid, it was on sale for 32. I think it sits around 35 Canadian. And for the non-chill filter and a little bit of small batch cred and a cool looking bottle, this is not a bad value whiskey in my opinion. I think it's got a good presentation, and I was surprised that it didn't show up in the awards, but then I guess it's older. Like, what I mean is they may not have submitted it. I don't know. They paid to get it in, but they may have. Anyways, not bad. Not going to change your heart and mind about Canadian. A little bit of metallic, a little bit of you know, youthful bitter that I'm getting a little bit in the palate. But if you like full-on caramel sweet whiskey, this isn't offensive. Kind of cool. Thanks for joining me out here on the deck in what is now a beautiful, beautiful January day in the Edmonton area. Hope you guys are having a great weekend. Take care.